In 1945, an Egyptian farmer, digging near Nag Hammadi, felt his hoe strike something hard. Inside a ceramic jar, sealed for nearly 2,000 years, he found 13 ancient leather manuscripts. Among them was the Gospel of Thomas, a text the church considered so dangerous, they ordered its destruction way back in the 4th century. But here's the thing no one tells you. Decades before this incredible find, Einstein had already reached the same conclusions that this forbidden gospel taught. And when you understand what he discovered, you'll realize why they kept it hidden from you. Einstein wasn't just a physicist. He was a profound philosopher who spent decades studying the very nature of reality. And on April 25, 1929, when Rabbi Herbert Goldstein sent a telegram asking if Einstein believed in God, his answer shocked the religious world. Einstein replied that he believed in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the ordered harmony of what exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fates and actions of human beings. This statement seemed like heresy to many, but Einstein was describing something Jesus had already taught 2,000 years earlier. In words the church worked tirelessly to suppress. In the Gospel of Thomas, verse 77, Jesus declares something extraordinary. He says that he is the light that is above all things, that he is the all, that from him all things came, and to him all things extend. And then comes the most revealing part. Jesus says, "Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up a stone, and you will find me there." Pause and consider what this means. Jesus isn't talking about a distant God in the heavens. He's describing a divine presence that permeates absolutely everything. The wood, the stone, you, me, the very air you're breathing right now. This is exactly what Einstein called cosmic religion. And this is precisely what Spinoza described when he said that God and nature are one and the same. But why was this hidden? Why did the early church fight so fiercely to destroy the Gospel of Thomas? The answer is power. If God is in everything and everyone, you don't need intermediaries. You don't need an institution to connect you with the divine. You don't need to pay tithes or follow rules created by men. The truth would set you free, and that was unacceptable to those who wanted control. Einstein understood this profoundly. In a letter he wrote in 1954, just months before he died, he was brutally honest. He said that the word God was, for him, nothing more than the expression and product of human weaknesses, and that the Bible was a collection of venerable, but still primitive, legends. That he called the Jewish religion, just like all other religions, an incarnation of the most childish superstition. But be careful not to misinterpret this. Einstein wasn't an atheist. He rejected organized religion, not spirituality. There's a monumental difference between the two. What Einstein embraced was something far older and far deeper. It was the same vision that Jesus taught in the Gospel of Thomas, a vision that modern quantum physics is only just beginning to confirm. Let me explain how this works, because this is where science and mysticism meet, in a way that will completely change your perspective. In quantum physics, there's a phenomenon called entanglement. Two particles, once connected, remain instantly linked, regardless of the distance between them. You can put one on Earth and another on the far side of the galaxy, and when you change one, the other responds immediately, not at the speed of light, instantaneously. Einstein initially resisted this idea. He called it spooky action at a distance, but experiments proved him wrong about resisting, and at the same time, proved his deepest intuition was right. Because what quantum entanglement demonstrates is that at the most fundamental level, everything is connected. There is no real separation. The idea that you are an isolated individual, separate from the universe around you, is an illusion. A very convincing illusion, but still, an illusion. Now, Go back to the Gospel of Thomas. Jesus says that he is the all, that from him all things came, and to him all things extend. He's describing exactly this universal interconnectedness. And when he says, "Split the wood and I am there, lift the stone and you will find me there," he's saying that this divine consciousness permeates all matter. Quantum physics confirms this. At the subatomic level, there is no solid matter. There are only fields of energy and probability, and those fields respond to observation. Consciousness literally affects physical reality. Quantum physicist Anton Zeilinger, who won the Nobel Prize in 2022, has argued that we have compelling evidence that there is no objective reality beyond what we observe. It is observation that creates reality. Think about what that means. There is no world out there. Independent of the consciousness that observes it, the observer and the observed are entangled. They are inseparable. Jesus knew this 2,000 years ago. Einstein intuited it a century ago, and now science is confirming it. But here's something even more impressive that few realize. The Gospel of Thomas wasn't written by theologians or philosophers. It was preserved by ordinary people who recognized something deeply true in these words, people who risked their lives to protect these teachings from destruction. And when you examine other verses in this Gospel, the parallel with modern physics becomes even more striking. In verse 22, Jesus speaks about making the two into one, the inner as the outer, the above as the below. This sounds like abstract mystical language, until you realize it's exactly what Einstein's theory of relativity demonstrated. Space and time are not separate things. They are a single reality called space-time. What appears to be two distinct things is actually one. The same logic applies to matter and energy. Before Einstein, we thought they were completely different. His famous equation showed that they are the same thing in different states. MC2. Matter is condensed energy. Energy is matter released, the two becoming one. What seems separate is united at a deeper level. In verse 113, when the disciples ask when the kingdom will come, Jesus answers something revolutionary. He says, "The kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, but men do not see it. It's not in the future. It's not in another place. It's here, now, everywhere. We simply fail to perceive it." Quantum physics says the exact same thing. The quantum field of infinite possibilities exists at every point in space, at every moment. But our limited senses can only perceive a tiny fraction of that reality. We are literally surrounded by dimensions and possibilities that we simply can't see. The kingdom, it's spread out all over the earth, but people just don't see it. This begs a really disturbing question. If this truth is so fundamental, why have we been kept in the dark for so long? I'm about to tell you something. That's going to make you see history in a completely different light. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea. The official goal to unify Christian doctrine, but the real goal was to create a religion that served the state, a religion of control. Texts that emphasized the direct experience of the divine, like the Gospel of Thomas, were declared heretical. Gnosis, which means direct knowledge, was replaced by pistis, which means blind faith. You no longer needed to know God directly. You needed to believe what the church told you about God. This wasn't some theological accident. It was a deliberate power play. Einstein saw right through this strategy. He wrote that the path to genuine religiosity doesn't come from fear of life, fear of death, or blind faith, but through striving toward rational knowledge, not blind faith, direct knowledge, gnosis. And that's exactly what the Gospel of Thomas teaches. Jesus is presented, not as a savior who dies for sins, but as a teacher who had his spiritual eyes opened through gnosis, a direct and personal experience of the divine. And he's teaching others to have that same experience. In verse 3 of the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says the kingdom is not in the heavens, because then the birds would get there first. It's not in the sea, because then the fish would get there first. The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. Compare that with what Einstein said about his cosmic religion. He described the cosmic religious sense as something that doesn't involve an anthropomorphic idea of God. The individual feels the futility of human desires and aims, and the sublimity and marvelous order which reveal themselves both in nature and in the world of thought. He feels the individual destiny as a prison and seeks to experience the whole of existence as a unity full of significance, the whole of existence as a unity. The kingdom inside and outside of you. These aren't two different ideas. It's the same truth, expressed in two different ways. And here's what makes this even more profound. Einstein frequently used a parable to describe his view of God. He would say, "We are in the position of a little child, entering a huge library, whose walls are covered to the ceiling with books in many different languages. The child knows that someone must have written those books, doesn't know who or how, doesn't understand the languages in which they are written. The child notes a definite plan in the arrangement of the books, a mysterious order which it doesn't comprehend, but only dimly suspects." Einstein went on to say that account, it seems to him, is the attitude of the human mind, even the greatest and most cultured, toward God. We see a universe marvelously arranged, obeying certain laws, but we understand the laws only dimly. Our limited minds cannot grasp the mysterious force that sways the constellations. This humility before the mystery is precisely what the Gnostic texts teach. It's not intellectual arrogance. It's recognizing that there is something vastly greater than our current understanding, and yet still seeking to know more. The Gospel of Thomas, verse 2 says, "Whoever seeks and should not stop seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will be disturbed. When he is disturbed, he will marvel, and he will reign over the all." That's the path of knowledge. You seek. You find something disturbing, because it challenges everything you've been taught. You overcome the disturbance, and you arrive at marveling, and then you realize that you are part of the all, that you always have been. Einstein walked this path. His discoveries about the relativity of space and time deeply disturbed our understanding of reality, and he arrived at marveling at that cosmic religious sense that he described with such reverence. But most people never even start this journey, because from childhood, we're taught to accept ready-made answers, to believe without questioning, to fear doubt. Have you ever stopped to think why they taught you to fear questions? A person who questions is much harder to control than a person who simply obeys, and power structures, whether religious, political, or economic, they depend on obedience. Einstein was persecuted his entire life for refusing to blindly obey. The Nazis hunted him for being Jewish. The FBI spied on him for decades for his political views, and the scientific community initially ridiculed his most revolutionary ideas, but he persisted because he had glimpsed something that he couldn't deny. He had touched that mysterious order that governs the universe, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The same is true of the teachings of the Gospel of Thomas. Once you truly understand what Jesus was saying, the institutionalized version of religion will never seem sufficient again. And maybe that's why these texts were buried, literally buried. Someone in 4th century Egypt took these manuscripts, put them in a ceramic jar, and buried them in the desert. Probably a monk, probably hiding them from the destruction ordered by religious authorities. For 1600 years, these teachings remained hidden, and when they finally came to light in 1945, the world already had Einstein. The world already had quantum physics. The world was already ready to understand what, 2,000 years ago, was considered too dangerous for the common person. But the story gets even more interesting when you realize the dates. Einstein published his theory of special relativity in 1905. General relativity came in 1915. Quantum mechanics began to take shape in the 1920s, and in 1927, at the famous Solvay conference, Einstein debated with Niels Bohr about the fundamental nature of reality. These developments created a new scientific paradigm, a paradigm where matter and energy are interchangeable, where space and time are relative, where observation affects the observed, where everything is connected in ways that defy our intuition. And then, in 1945, less than a generation after these scientific concepts took hold, the Nag Hammadi manuscripts were discovered, texts that expressed in spiritual language exactly what physics was discovering in mathematical language: synchronicity. Carl Jung coined that term, to describe meaningful coincidences that appear to have no cause, but carry profound meaning. The discovery of these texts, at the exact historical moment when we could finally understand them, is a stunning synchronicity. Jung, by the way, was absolutely fascinated by the Gnostic texts. He saw in them an accurate description of the human psyche, the journey of individuation, the process of becoming whole, and he corresponded with Einstein. They knew and respected each other. There's a web of connections here that goes far beyond mere chance. Brilliant minds of the 20th century, each in their own field, arriving at complementary conclusions about the nature of reality, and ancient texts resurfacing precisely when someone could finally decipher them. This doesn't prove anything, of course, but it certainly makes you think. There's one word that connects all of this, a word Einstein used frequently: mystery. Not mystery in the sense of a secret, but mystery in the sense of something so vast and profound that our finite minds can't fully grasp it. Einstein said that the most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It's the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science. He went on to say that whoever doesn't know it and can no longer marvel, can no longer feel awe, is as good as dead, their eyes extinguished. The Gospel of Thomas teaches exactly this. Keep your eyes open. Keep searching. Never be content with the answers that others give you. Find it for yourself. In verse 5, Jesus says to know what is before your face, and what is hidden from you will be revealed. For there is nothing hidden that will not be made manifest. This is science. This is the very definition of the scientific method. Observe what is before you without prejudice. And let the truth reveal itself. Einstein practiced this every day. He looked at the equations, at the phenomena, at nature, and let it reveal its secrets. He didn't impose his beliefs on reality. He let reality inform his beliefs. And when he did that with sincerity and persistence, he arrived at the same conclusions that a spiritual master had taught 2 millennia before. Coincidence? Or evidence that there is a fundamental truth that different seekers find when they look deeply enough? I'd say it's the second option. And modern quantum physicists are coming to the same conclusion. Consider the principle of non-locality. Quantum particles aren't limited to space and time as we understand it. They exist in a state of superposition until they are observed. And when one entangled particle is observed, its partner instantly assumes a corresponding state, no matter the distance. This means that at the quantum level, the idea of spatial separation doesn't apply. Everything is connected at a more fundamental level than space-time. In the Gospel of Thomas, verse 50, the disciples ask Jesus where he came from. He replies that he came from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself and established itself and manifested itself through its image. Light that came into being by itself. That established itself. That manifested in forms. That's astonishingly similar to what modern cosmology tells us. The Big Bang began with a singularity of pure energy, of pure light. That energy expanded, condensed, formed matter, formed stars, formed you and me. We literally came from the light. The light manifested in our form. Jesus was speaking in metaphors, certainly, but metaphors that pointed to physical truths that we'd only understand 2 millennia later. And when Einstein developed his famous equation, he showed that mass and energy are equivalent. What is energy in its purest form? Light. Photons traveling at the maximum speed allowed by the universe. We are condensed light. We are the universe contemplating itself. Modern quantum physicists are coming to the same conclusion. The quantum consciousness paradigm explains that consciousness is immortal, non-local, and can operate independently of the physical brain. This supports a multidimensional view of the human mind that Gnostic texts described in poetic language 2,000 years ago. Separation is an illusion. That's what quantum physics confirms. That's what mystics have always said. And that's what Einstein intuited when describing the individual destiny as a prison from which we must escape through the experience of the totality. But the question remains, what do you do with this information? Because knowing this intellectually isn't enough. The Gospel of Thomas isn't interested in you accumulating knowledge like facts. It's interested in transformation. In verse 70, Jesus says that if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. This is deep psychology. This is what Jung would call shadow integration. What's hidden in you, what you deny, what you repress. That material doesn't disappear. It works against you beneath the surface. But when you bring it to consciousness, when you illuminate it with attention, it transforms from poison into medicine. Einstein understood this intuitively. He followed his curiosity wherever it led him, even when it meant challenging Newton, even when it meant being ridiculed by his colleagues, even when it meant admitting he was wrong about quantum entanglement. The truth was more important than his ego. The mystery was more important than comfortable certainty. There's a story about Einstein that few people know. In his later years, he worked obsessively on a unified field theory, a single equation that would explain all the forces of the universe as manifestations of a single fundamental reality. He died before he could achieve it. But theoretical physicists today continue this quest. String theory, loop quantum gravity, M theory, all attempt to find this unification. And what is this unification? But the mathematical expression of what mystics have always said, that behind the apparent diversity, there is a fundamental unity, that the whole is present in every part. That separation is an illusion. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift a stone, and you will find me there. Physics is trying to find the equation that describes this. The Gospel of Thomas already offered the metaphor that expresses it. And now, you have a choice. You can continue living in the simplified version of reality that you've been taught. The version where you're a separate individual, in a mechanical universe, waiting for a distant God to judge you after death. Or you can awaken to the truth that Einstein saw, that Jesus taught, that quantum physics confirms. The truth that you are not separate from anything, that the consciousness that you are permeates the entire universe, that the kingdom is within you and around you, at this very moment. Modern physics tells us that at the most fundamental level, all matter is energy, vibrating at different frequencies. There's no real solidity. There's only information, pattern, consciousness expressing itself in infinite forms. You are one of those forms, but you're also the consciousness observing the form. And that consciousness wasn't born when your body was born. And it won't die when your body dies. Because consciousness isn't produced by the brain. The brain is more like an antenna, receiving consciousness. This is what Einstein called reconnecting to the all. This is what Jesus called finding the kingdom. This is what quantum physicists today are trying to describe with their equations and experiments. Think about the practical impact of this. If you really understand that you're not separate from the universe, that your consciousness is part of a larger consciousness, how does that change your life? First, fear diminishes. Fear comes from the feeling of being a fragile, isolated organism in a hostile universe. When you realize you are the universe experiencing itself, the hostility vanishes. You are at home, everywhere. Second, competition loses its meaning. If you and I are expressions of the same fundamental reality, competing with you is competing with myself. Cooperation becomes the obvious choice. Third, death loses its terror, not because you believe in a promised heaven, but because you realize that the consciousness you are didn't arise with your body and won't disappear with it. Forms come and go. The consciousness that observes the forms remains. Einstein wasn't afraid of death. He said one life was enough for him, not because he was a nihilist, but because he understood that he was connected to something much bigger than his individual existence. The Gospel of Thomas expresses this in verse 11. Jesus says that the heavens and the earth will pass away before you. What lives from the living will not see death. What lives from the living consciousness within you, that is part of the living consciousness of the universe, that doesn't die. Only the temporary forms it assumes die. The truth has always been here, in ancient texts, buried in the desert, in the intuitions of geniuses who dared to think differently, in the experimental data from quantum physics laboratories. Now it's in you too. The question is, what will you do with it? Down in the comments, I want to know your thoughts. Do you think Einstein and Jesus were speaking of the same truth, or do you see all this as hype? Let me know where you stand. And if you felt like this knowledge transformed you in some way, consider supporting this work through Super Thanks. It's not payment. It's you saying that the truth matters, that you're a seeker, not just a passive bystander. In the end, the choice is yours. Split the wood, lift the stone, and find what's always been there, waiting for you.